Okay, let's get started with one thing though, Pedro. I think did you forget something, Pedro?
Yeah, I think I'm a
Did
little
you
bit out
set
of
up?
character, right?
Okay, I think you
Okay,
got to
let's
get
see
into care.
if I can change this a little bit. Okay,
There we
cool.
go. There
How
we
does it look
go.
now?
That's
Is
what
it
I'm
good?
talking about. Yeah, you're ready to
Okay,
rock and
cool.
roll. Hey, if you can dream it, you can build it, Pedro. Okay. Welcome everyone to July's cmBuilder workshop. We're here with the man, the myth, the legend, the Barbie, the Ken,
I can be
Pedro Souza.
whatever.
Ken was Barbie big in when you were growing up in Brazil? A big
In
thing there,
Brazil,
or
it
what?
was. It was. Yes. Yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah.
getting bigger by
Okay.
the minute now. Yeah, with the
Yeah. No
latest
kidding.
this movie, everybody wants a Barbie now. Even I want a Barbie now.
Hey, he's making a comeback. Okay, so we're gonna dive into it. Thanks everyone for joining. So we have the chat and the Q&A open throughout the workshop. Just if you have questions, something you're working on right now, or you have questions, right, just pop them in there. You can either just ask questions as we go, and we'll just stop and answer them, or we'll keep a few minutes at the end for Q&A, and we'll even hang out a little bit after if you want to go dive deep into a topic that you're working on currently. So Pedro, without
Awesome.
further ado, take it away.
Yeah, awesome. So today we're gonna cover these topics. So I'm gonna do a review of like the drone import process. A lot of people have been asking about this lately, so I thought that would be interesting for us to cover that again. We have a new zone creation interface. Also by customers' demand, a lot of people have been asking questions about the performance, how to improve the performance of the computer while using it. So there are some settings that is interesting for us to check. Dynamic GLB, the name probably doesn't mean anything, but it will make sense once I get there. So we have also like a part where we're gonna focus on tips and tricks and the Q&A in the yet. Okay, so let's dive right into it. So drone imports. What can you do in cmBuilder once you do have a drone import, right? So the idea of a drone scan is that you're going to produce a accurate representation of that location of the area that you're working on, right? So in cmBuilder, for you to use that information, you have to split that into three types of information, right? So one is for you to improve the shape of your terrain according to your drone scan. So we need to have the terrain isolated in one single file. You can improve the texture of the map, the background of the map. So that's the orthomosaic projection. So basically, it's a flat picture that you're going to project down the ground and use that. And the surrounding area, right? Other elements that are in your surrounding, like your buildings, like trees and things like that. So for that, we would do pretty much the same process on the first one, but we will isolate the buildings, right? So we will focus today on these two because they are the most complexest one. And keep in mind that for drone imports, we have to assess what is the available data before we even start like thinking about importing that data inside cmBuilder. So what is that you have available in your hands? Is it a point cloud or is it a mesh? A mesh is basically a surface that has a texture in it or cannot have a may or may not have a texture, right? So it is the information that you have does the textures are they correctly mapped. So sometimes the textures are not very well mapped with the geometry, so it might give you some weird results. Is the point cloud clean? So just recently we were working with a customer that had a point cloud that they wanted to import inside cmBuilder, and they didn't notice in the beginning that the point cloud was duplicated, right? So there was like an offset that was creating some weird meshes and some weird geometries. So usually also like you're working with very big files. So usually point clouds can go from 1 gig to 15 gigs. So like it's always like a process of if working with them. And if it's a complex area, you're probably going to spend a little bit more time tuning up that file, right? So with is the process that we need to do. So basically, we're gonna take that drone scan from a drone software. You can use like any drone software that you have available, like Pix4D, like Drone Deploy, and so many others. And the idea is that you're gonna take that file and you're going to export that file into an OBJ or an FBX file. So this is a geometry file that has a texture like the one that you're seeing over here in the picture, and the next step is for you to separate your buildings in your terrain. So we will need to find a way to process this file, to take your buildings and put them in one bucket, take your vehicles, your trees in another bucket, but most importantly, to have a terrain in a isolated mesh, okay, isolated geometry. So there are a couple ways that we can do that, and this also depends which type of data you have available. So if it's a point cloud, if it's a mesh scan, you will use certain types of software. But I just like I'm showing a couple of options over here. So free options, free softwares that you can download and use right now are Blender, Cloud Compare, and Scene. You might have others, but these are the most common ones that I usually use. And paid softwares, we have Autodesk, Recap Pro, and Recap Photo. These are probably the most common ones that I've seen people using the most. But also, I know that Agisoft produces has a paid version where it automatically classifies the points by their what they are. Like if the point cloud you have like a specific set of points that is a terrain, that is vehicles, that are beauties, and so on. And also, Point Fuse is another software that creates a geometry out of point clouds. Okay, so today we're going to focus on Blender. And the reason why is because Blender, even though it's not the most automatic and simple software to use, is the one that will give you more customization capabilities. Okay, so for to use Blender, we have some steps. I'm not gonna share these steps at the moment. These are gonna it's more from my own notes over here. But basically, we have a set of steps that we use, and you could look for cheat sheets online that will help you with like the main navigation interface instructions about Blender, right? But I'm gonna open Blender right now, and once you open a project in Blender, this is what it looks like. So it will always come with a camera, a cube, and a light. And this is not supposed to be a Blender tutorial, so I'm gonna go with the most like the overall idea of like the software. So I'm gonna select all of these elements in here, and I'm gonna delete them because I don't need them. And I'm gonna import a file that is gonna be an OBJ file that's coming from a drone scan, right? So if I go and find that information over here, let me go back and go into my workshop Blended Terrain. So I'm going to select an OBJ file, and every OBJ file that comes from a drone scan will also have an MTL file and several texture files with it. So you have to have them in the same folder once you open it. So what I did over here, I imported that, and you can see that the file is flipped. So I'm gonna delete this, and I'm gonna import that again just to show you what is the difference. So if you go into OBJ and you select that OBJ file, in here you have the forward axis and up axis. So let's just change the forward axis to Y, and the up axis will automatically change to Z. And when you import that, you see that the file is now going to be imported in the right shape. Okay, so oops, 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 I'm doing things wrong over here with my PowerPoint. Let me keep this on the side. Yes, so basically we're gonna do a couple of checks over here. So I'm gonna select that mesh, and I'm gonna go to object and set the origin, and I'm gonna move the geometry to the origin. So this is gonna move so the geometry is set up to the origin, and I'm gonna click on this fourth sphere over here on the side, because that is gonna show me the textures that are mapped to that geometry. So this will really help me understand what is a building, what is a part of the terrain, what is a car, what is planters, and so on and so forth, right? So it's going to take a couple seconds, and it will show up like this, right? So now what we need to do is look at the tree structure that you see over here on the side. We're going to right click and create new collections. So I'm going to create a collection for buildings and a collection for vehicles. Okay, vehicles. And the one over here on the top, I'm going to keep that as a terrain. So basically, this will be my buckets in which I'm going to separate this geometry. So to separate the geometry, we're going to click on that, and we're going to click over here and go into edit mode. So this will expose all the vertices of that structure, as you see over here. And we also going to click on the X-ray selection, which is this button over here on the top. That means that every point that my selection touches will be selected, right? So we have some different selection styles. So one is to click and drag to select a bunch of parts, and these will select all those those vertices over there. But if you click on this selection box and hold, you will see that there are other types of selections, and we're going to use the lasso selection. Also, I'm going to click on the Z sphere over here to snap my view from the top. So their navigation, it's very simple. So if you hold Shift and click the middle mouse button, you'll be able to navigate on Blender. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Shift and draw around the building. And this is going to select all of those parts. And then I'm going to hold Shift again and then draw around the building over here. And this will add to that selection. So if you see now, that whole building is highlighted. So I'm going to right click on that, click on separate, and separate by selection. So now in my tree structure over here, you're going to see that this mesh is going to be split into two. And the one that is selected is going to change the view because it's gonna the one that is selected is going to be separated. It's not going to be on edit mode. It's going to be in object mode, and the other one is going to be on edit mode. And I'm not sure why this is taking that long to complete, but at least it was completed. Okay, so you see now I have a mesh that represents this whole part and the other one that represents this part. So I'm going to click on this one and drag it to the building group. And now this mesh is part of that building collections. And I prefer to work with it like turned off so I can focus on the things that I haven't yet selected. So I'm going to do another building over here. I'm going to hit my left click, separate, selection. And again, this is going to do the same thing. It's going to take this out, and I'm going to take this one and put it over here. Okay. So let's consider that I already did this correctly with the buildings. I could do a fine tuning by selecting more parts over here if I wanted, right? But let's move on to the vehicles now. I'm going to just go back to my Z selection, and then I'm going to zoom in and then do the same selection now with these vehicles. Right click, separate, selection, and then we will take now the new mesh and we're going to put this inside vehicles, right? So once you're done with this process, what's going to happen is that you're going to have your mesh with a lot of openings, and this is fine depending on the sizes of those openings. That's not a big problem because cmBuilder is smart enough to fill those holes with some parameters. Okay. Other things that you can do at this stage as well is to either reduce the quality of some of these meshes of these groups or smooth it out a little bit. So if I go back into object mode over here, you can see all of those meshes, and then I can select the vehicles over here. For example, if I want to isolate them, I can isolate by turning them on and off. And using this one as an example, I'm going to select it over here, and I can go into my edit mode, right click on this, and select a bunch of these parts, select it all, right click, and use this smooth vertices over here. So this has some parameters that you can change to define how this is going to be smoothing those edges to create like a more linear like shape. Another thing that you can do to reduce the quality of these images if you wanted to like save some processing is to click on this modifier properties over here and add a decimation property. So in here, you can put in like a ratio. Let's say if I put like 0.5, the quality of this mesh now is going to be reduced, right? So you see now it's 0.5. If I put 0.1, the quality is going to reduce even more, right? So you can play around with this to kind of like reduce the amount of points that you have, the amount of triangles, and make your whole mesh a little bit more suitable for a web browser. Okay, so these are a little bit of an instructions about how to do that, how to separate them, how to process them a little bit more. But when you're ready with your terrain, the most important part over here is you have a terrain isolated like I have it over here. Imagine that I did this process to remove all of these cars. So the most important part of this process is to select the mesh that you want, go into File, Export a GLB file. So this GLB file, you can put it in anywhere, but the idea is that you're gonna click on the include and do only the selected objects and click on transform and deactivate this Y up. Okay, and when you do that, now you have a GLB file that will represent your terrain. Of course, this one over here, I didn't finish the processing because it would take me some time to separate everything. But basically, what you can do now is if you go into cmBuilder, you can take a, let's see, I'm gonna take like any random scenario over here, and I can go into my buildings, import a mesh, and then I can upload that file that I just created, this one. This is going to take some time because the file is quite big. But once I imported that file, if it's representing just my terrain, I could come here in my project setup, click on custom terrain, click on terrain, create a terrain from a mesh. I would select that mesh and then my terrain would fit to that elevation. So this is like something that I already covered in another workshop. That's why I'm not showing too much details over here. But today is just to show you that there is a capability for you to do this process with Blender, and I do that a lot for a couple customers as well. So there are other tools.
Can I cut you
Yep.
off too? So just one thing to know that the GLB is it's a bit of an obscure file format. Actually, a lot of softwares export it to it, but you just probably haven't heard much about it. We do the next phase is going to be to take an FBX for the exact same thing. So I just wanted to communicate that the GLB is kind of like a step one. Step two is to skip a step and just go FBX and be able to do the same thing. So I just wanted everyone to know that's in the roadmap and hopefully coming soon.
Awesome. Exactly. So yeah, so this process is just to get to the point where we have a shape of the terrain isolated and everything else also isolated. And then you can import those things to have them as your references for surroundings better than the white shapes that are generated automatically over here in Builder. So if you want better shapes than this, you can simply isolate your buildings and then bring them over in cmBuilder and position them correctly. Okay. Cool. Awesome. So going to the next step of this process is so to the next step of our session is to talk about the zone interface. So a lot of people were asking us to create unlimited zones. We only had 8 types of zones before, so we changed this a little bit, and now you can have unlimited zone types, as many as you want. We also have updated the controls related to the zones. We have the properties function now, and the different color picking and transparency type. So let's go and open a new scenario over here. And let's say that I want to create a zone on this parking lot, for example. Now I will go into project setup, click on zones, and now my zone panel shows up on the right hand side before it was in the left hand side, and you will be invited to create a sketch right away. So I can take a sketch and always working on 2D to draw my sketches. I'm gonna go and select a specific shape of this parking lot and define that this is gonna be my I don't know, accommodation location. So this color will inherit the last color that you selected. But if you want to change more the color, you can click on this and you have the system defaults, but you also can add custom colors where you can put in a color and then you can change the transparency of that object with this light over here in the bottom. So this is a little bit different from what we had before, but is very comprehensive because now let's say that you want to create another zone with the same color, you can simply select that. And then in this zone, that color is going to be saved over here in your custom colors. So you can create as many colors as you want. And then you can pick and choose which one you're going to use. Okay. Another interesting thing about the zones right now is that you have the properties. So everything related to the movement, the rotation, and like adjustment of these zones are now all these commands are compiled over here right beside the site sheet, and this is going to become a norm in cmBuilder. We are going to bring out all of these commands to this site sheet, and you can also go into properties, and you see that the zone type is undefined. So when you click over here, you can define this zone to be a specific thing, so a hazard area, for example, or you can click on this and type in a name. Let's say that this is going to be your muster point. So when you type in the name, you can now create this new zone type. For now, these zone types are just tags, and you cannot use them. They are not used for anything else than just like identification. But later on, we want to use these zone types to give you like more capabilities in terms of like how to place a crane, like no go zones, no flying zones, and things like that.
Maybe what
Okay.
you can show, what I like to do is I just use the 3D label on top of the zone, right? So you can just take the same muster point or whatever and just drop a label on and just like make it look nice on top of the zone. That's another option as well.
Yeah. There are
Combine the two.
three main annotation tools in cmBuilder. So one is the zones, two is the lines, where you can create your lines and like we'll annotate on a specific area, right? And then you can project that on your terrain. You can change the style of that line. You can make it smaller and so on and so forth. And the other one is the labels, right? So if you go in the 3D labels, you can place in a label over here. This is very big because it's using the last size that I used. So I can change my label sizes from here and then just put in this is the muster point, for example. And then like change this a little bit. Cool. Yeah, so you have a combination of like all of these, and then you can edit the sketch to make it like in a way that you highlight like more of that area that you're working on. Like this, for example. Sorry, need to delete the other ones. Okay, when I hit confirm, now I want this to be white, and it's even more highlighted than what I had before. Okay, cool. So this is it for the zones, the new zone interface. And now let's go into performance settings, right? So the only Barbie that I could find that had anything to do with performance was an athlete Barbie. So thank God she's playing soccer or football, as I would say in my homeland. And there are three things that are important for us to do for performance settings. So the first one is to check the cmBuilder tracker. The second one is to check Windows settings, and the third one is to check the browser settings. So let me show you how to do with all of them. So basically, the performance tracker is going to be over here on the tools, and then app performance. So we talked about this before, but I just wanted to like show this to like new users that this is going to review whatever inherited whatever problems you're having with your performance. So like if your frame rate is like too low, this will show you why. And if there's anything they need to do related to your performance in your hardware or software, this is also going to show you why. For example, if I remove my computer from my battery right now, from my power outlet, this will show me that the battery mode is turned on. So like there is some instructions over here that it's better to work with your computer connected to power, right? Also, if you do have a graphics card and you cannot see the name of the graphics card over here, it means that Chrome or whatever browser you're using is not identifying, is not connected to your graphics card. So that's what we're going to do right now is learn how to do that. Yeah, so this will review anything that you might need to do with your scenario or your computer. And there are two main settings that we need to change. So the first one is to go over here in your browser. It's very similar for Chrome or Edge, but basically you're going to go find your system settings and make sure that your user hardware acceleration is turned on, right? And the second one is to go into Windows. If you're using Windows, just go into Windows and you do a search. Let me get out of this for graphics, and you're going to see your graphics settings. And when you click on this window will show up. So in here, what you need to do is to turn the first option on, hardware accelerated GPU, and you're gonna browse from here what is the browser that you're using, and you're gonna select the executable file for that, and once the file is in this list, you can click on options and then turn it to high performance, right? So this will make more difference if you have a graphics card. If you don't, probably the difference is not that great. Okay. So these are the three things that we need to do to improve the performance of our session in cmBuilder. So take a look at the tracker, go into the Windows settings, and also the browser settings. Cool. So going to the next step of our workshop is the dynamic GLB. So why is this important? Right now in cmBuilder, when you import a file that it is like corresponding um, to your 3D building, like this one, for example, when you port a file like this geometry can only have one position in all the milestones. So you place the building where it's supposed to be, and it will stay there for all the milestones. If you change the position in a future milestone, it will also change for the previous ones, right? So that is by design because we don't want the building itself to change location in different points in time. But what we are building we are taking steps towards having a custom resource feature in cmBuilder where you're going to be able to import your own resources and create your own resources. This is more like in a medium term to long term kind of like a thing. But the first step to do that is to allow the GLB imports to move in different points in time. So if you do have any file that is a GLB file that can represent a part of your building or a resource that you're working on, and you want to have different positions in time, now you'll be able to do so. So you see that this is an imported file. So like if I delete this one, I can import this cube, right? So you can upload a file, and I can, let me go here and take a file that in this case is just an example, but the idea that is this would represent a geometry of an imported resource that you want to have different points in different positions in different points in time. And then now the GLB will have this commands as well, the same commands that you have for movement of a resource. So basically, you're going to click on move, and this GLB will be constant by default, and we're going to change that to dynamic. So we will be able to have this object having different positions in different milestones. So now we will be able to have this object moving. So there was a user the other day that he wanted to show the rigging of a piece of like equipment into a specific level, and he couldn't do that because that piece of equipment, it was an imported file, an imported geometry. So he had to import that 3 times to have to show it in 3 different positions. But with the GLB movement now, you would not need to do that. You just import that in one single time in a GLB format, and you will be able to define different positions for that. So this is important for example, prefabricated parts. If you want to show that the prefabricated parts will be stored in a specific location, and then they were going to be moved and transported to their final location, you can use this tool now to do that same kind of like step-by-step movement of that object.
Hey, can you just double click on the ability to can change over time versus constant? Just I think you went through it quickly because probably a lot of you know what this is, but some are newer users. Can you just explain this concept?
No worries. Yes. So resources and now the GLB, they will have the concept of the position being dynamic or constant, right? So whenever I click in one of the functions over here that activates a change in the position, and these functions are move, rotate, or snap, you see that there is this command over here that is for you to define if the position is supposed to be constant or dynamic. So dynamic means that this object can have one position per milestone. So you can rotate, you can move that object in each one of the milestones, and cmBuilder will capture that. Constant means that regardless in which milestone you're going to be, that object will have the same position. So for example, if I want this object to move around on my milestones, I have milestone project start, milestone number 2, and milestone number 3, I can double click on this object, going to move and set this position to be dynamic. So now if I go to my week number 1, I have this position, but in week number 2, I'm gonna move it and I'm gonna rotate it, and I'm gonna have a second position for week number 2, also milestone number 2. And on milestone number 3, I'm gonna also move it again, and maybe the screen needs to take a quick rest, and we're gonna put it to lie down over here in the ground. It was not an accident, it was by design, okay? So now if we go back and forth on all these different stages, you will see that now, because this is set up to be dynamic, I'm having several positions for this crane in different points in time. If I set this up to be constant, while I was acting in milestone number 3, now you see that even though I'm flipping through the milestones, the object remains the same location. Cool. So this logic now is going to be applied to the GLB imports as well. So that's why it's very important.
Just let me, so the use case that is the most common is jumping a crane. So the parameter change also counts, not just like the
Yes.
like moving it around. So if you change a parameter, you want the crane to jump, that's a use case. So people often ask, why do we have this? So sometimes users accidentally move things and they don't know why it moved things. So some of the resources that make the most sense, we tried anyways hard, will be set as constant. So things that you likely don't move much throughout the job should be set as constant. Things that like cars drive and cranes move, things that are dynamic, you want to set it to dynamic so that you can show those animations are different, like positions throughout the simulation. So most of it is based on that and other use cases that I've come across.
Yeah. So let's say, like what Javi just mentioned, if I click on the adjust function, I'm going to see a list of all the parameters of that crane, and they're all set up to be dynamic over here. But if I define, for example, that my jib length is going to be constant, I can take this parameter specifically and I can apply it to all milestones. So you see now I have 2 groups, one that shows the jib length as a constant parameter and one that shows all the rest as dynamic, right? So let's say that on milestone number 3, I decided to increase the size of this object, right? So for me to kind of like manage all these changes that are happening in different points in time on my crane, I can take a look at the timeline details. So when I expand this timeline details, I will see in each one of the milestones that this crane is supposed to show, what are the changes that are happening to it. So in milestone number in week number 1 over here, let me change this to the milestone view because it's easier. So milestone number 2, I can see that the tile location changed and the position and rotation updated. So I can deactivate those changes, can cancel those changes. And now the screen is not going to change from milestone 1 to 2. But on milestone 3, I can still see that the tower height is changing. So I can deactivate that as well. It's not a deactivation, it's a deletion, right? So that's the difference. Okay, cool. So this is not active yet, it's coming, and we'll probably have it available in the software in the next week or the following. Okay, so let's go to the tips and tricks now. So tips and tricks about how to improve your video recording. So whenever you're recording a video to present it to a customer or to put in a marketing piece or anything like that, you have to like try to get the best outcome possible, right? So there are 3 main topics that I would like to cover on this part, which is basically the first one is to balance the speeds, both of your recording, your animations, and your slide durations. And let me tackle that right now. So basically, if I go into a project that already has a presentation created for it, I can, oh, this one doesn't, yeah, this one has it. So you can see that every slide that does not have a camera change, every slide that has a thumbnail, it means that there is a camera change assigned to that slide. So the slides with a thumbnail, you see that you have the slide duration and your slide transition over here. Slide transition is basically how long it's going to take for you to go from the previous to the previous view, from the previous view to this one. And the slide duration is how long the slide is going to stay there when you're presenting this with the video. Okay. So keep in mind that like this over here, it's also interesting for you to check like if you which speeds are you adding to this, because when you are going into the share functionality and going to export a presentation video, in here, you can also define a recording speed. So this recording speed is for you to record the video with a slower pace, so the camera movements will be a little bit smoother. So when you do that and you speed it up the process later, the camera movements will be a little bit smoother, because there are a lot of stuff going on in your graphics card and like in your rendering in your view, and sometimes these movements of the cameras can be a little bit choppy, just because like this is performance. So if that's the case, you should record your video with a lower speed, and also manage the slide transitions over here. If you want to increase the how long the camera takes to go from point A to point B, you can, and later on you will speed up that video on another software. Okay. So about the animations, in the last um, workshop, I showed how to create these animations, right? So these animations, they are controlled by our visual programming tool, and the visual programming tool, it's still a little bit it's still on the experimental stage. We're still working on it and like improving it as we go. So this is a very complex one. We don't need to cover all of those, but when you're working with the simple ones, the one that I showed on the previous workshop, let me just create a line over here quickly and put in a little truck. If we go to the jump truck, I put this truck in here and go into my visual programming, put the swept path. You see that the swept path over here is going to use the line number 2, and you see that my truck is moving according to that line. However, there is this number on my visual graph that controls the speed. So if I increase this number, it means that it defines like how long it will take for it to go from point A or point B. So if you increase this number, it will take less time to do it, right? So it's a good thing to manage these properly, these speeds, because since the visual programming is still on like an experimental stage, this recording speed over here is not being applied to the animations. So you should create a slower animation and then record the video speed like with also a low like speed. Okay. Hopefully that part was not very confusing. So
yeah, I guess to summarize, and maybe some of you have seen, if you have big, heavy scenarios with a bunch of stuff moving and camera angles moving, if you have a faster transition, there was actually a question this morning from a customer. The end result can be a bit choppy at times, right? Because so the answer to this is slow it down. When you're recording it, go have a coffee, go have lunch, come back, and then you can just like take that final file and then edit it after to speed it up like 1.5 times or whatever you want, but the animations won't follow. So I can just try to paraphrase.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, Javi. Yeah, so the second thing is about the adjust the system settings. We've noticed that sometimes people want better resolutions for their video recording. And whenever you're doing this type of video recording over here, keep in mind that Chrome is or Edge will be using the actual tab and what's going on inside the tab when we're recording this live, right? So when you hit play, you should move your mouse away from the view. So now this is recording as it was like a screen recording, but focusing on your tab. And to increase the quality of this rendering, we rely on your monitor, on your computer settings. So for you to make sure that you get the best quality possible, one thing that you can do is go into your display settings and then choose that monitor and increase the resolution to the maximum over here, and also play a little bit with the zooming, because if you have like a small zoom instead of like have 200 or something like that, you work with like 100% with the maximum resolution, your screen, your icons are going to become smaller, but the quality of what's going on your video will be increased. This one over here. Okay, so the quality of the lines and the sharpness of the video overall, it increases. And the last thing about this is to adjust the graphic settings. So we have some graphic settings that are something that we like to use a lot to improve that view. So the first one is the ambient occlusion. So if you go into graphics over here, you can play around with this ambient occlusion, usually close to like 0.4 or even 0.5 would be like a good value to have it. We also like to increase the perspective, right? So to make it like 60 degrees and you increase that wide angle thing. You can play around with your background colors as well. Like, so this one to change it, and we are planning on having like actual pictures of the sky over here coming soon. Play around with the environmental lighting and see which one kind of like gives you the best balance of colors in your with your 3D models and so on. And also you can add zones in the ground like this to make the background shape a little bit lighter, the background image, sorry, a little bit lighter on the area of focus, you know. So you could increase this to make it like this whole block and have just that block a little bit lighter. Okay.
No, I
So
wanted to add, we get lots of questions lately about interior fit out type stuff. So I would suggest if you want to go back to camera angle, if you're doing interior fit outs or you want to show like walking through the, going through the video, but you might want to pull it to like a broader view angle. So it can give you a better perspective when you see if you're in here, if you change the camera view angle, it's going to be a lot easier to, yeah, exactly. So just a little tips and tricks if you're gonna go inside the building or inside the project and you want to show that, you can play around with that as well.
yeah, exactly. Cool. Yes, so this is it about improving a video recording. And now we can go into the drawing overlay cleanup, and we have our architectural Barbie over here to help us with that. So the idea of the new drawing overlay cleanup that we have is there are two things that I just wanted to highlight. So if I go back to the first milestone over here and bring back my field of view and go to what I was working before, you can go into your drawing overlay. And now if you open that, you see that there are a couple more functions over here. So the first one is the remove white background. So this will apply a mask to your white color and remove that from your view. Okay, for drawings, this is great. It will help a lot with like isolating the lines of your drawing. If these lines are not black, you can change them in your PDF software or something like that. You can change it to become a little bit like a different color that will contrast better with your satellite view. But if you want to use it black, you can go back to your map view and so on, right? So this really helps you kind of clean up that view a little bit. But also, if you think about bringing in like a site utility drawings, that would be great to have that extra layer of information in your site, so you can compare like what type of work you're doing with the utilities that are existing on the site. Okay. Another thing is that sometimes people don't know that much, but the timeline controller that I'm going to explain for the drawing, it also applies for like basically every object in cmBuilder will follow the same logic. But the idea is that for drawing specifically, if you disconnect this drawing from your timeline, it means that this drawing now does not belong on your sequence. So you don't need to define what is the first milestone and the last milestone that drawing is going to be visible, because a disconnected drawing it will remain hidden by default. So it will only show when you ask the software to show it. And to do that, you can open your drawing overlay menu and show it from here, or you can use the tools over here on the top and see a list of all available drawings that are disconnected from your timeline in this view over here in the top. Right, so this is super cool, this one over here, because you can turn on and off drawings while using other tools. Like if you're drawing a sketch, you can just come in here and then turn them on and off. Okay, so this is it for the drawings cleanup. And one thing that is super important, and I cannot stress this enough, is that whenever you're doing a drawing overlay, don't use this background image, because this background image is an approximation, shows an approximation of where the streets are and their names, but the sizes of the streets are quite different from the actual satellite image. So look at the street over here, for example, the one that goes north-south. If I turn this to my map view, the size of the street is quite small in terms of like the width compared to the actual satellite image. So whatever you have to do that requires you to align with a background image, always use the satellite image. Never use the other one. The other one is more for you to clean up your view and have a like lighter background and things like that, but they shouldn't be referenced to you as like sizings or accurate placement of objects, okay? And also, another thing about this part is that it's super important that you double check the location of your drawings according to the satellite image, because sometimes if you make a mistake with the first placement of your drawing, your first plate of your satellite image of your drone imagery, that that error is going to propagate because everything else is going to be aligned with the drawings, but they're going to be a little bit scanter. So it's always good to make sure that you were working with a drawing that has the correct placement and the correct scale. Okay. So always double check that with your background satellite image. Okay, going to the next tips and tricks, how to create a sequence of demolition using massing copies. So this is a great one. I did like something very similar to for a customer recently, but I'm gonna do a simpler version over here. So let's say that I'm gonna work with demolishing this building. So I could simply replace this with a simple massing and define the start and the end date for that object, right? But instead, I'm gonna do an extra step. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna create a just to recap this part, you cannot create demolition stages with an existing building because the existing buildings, the surrounding ones, they don't have the timeline configuration, right? So you have to replace this with a simple massing. So the easiest way to do that, let me see if I can find a more complex building, this one over here. So the easiest way to do that, and I'm gonna turn this off, is to create a massing, go into simple massing, click to add a volume, start your sketch on the ground. And now from here on, you're gonna click on the project and then select that existing massing, right? So when you hit confirm, you don't need to draw that sketch all over again because now you have a massing, a new massing that was created using that sketch. So I'm gonna delete the previous one. It was a Chipotle. I'm sorry, Chipotle. And now you can copy and paste the massing. So instead of redoing the same process to take that sketch, I'm gonna simply select the massing, do a copy, and then do a paste. A lot of people have requested copy paste for massings, and now we have it. So you can place it in the right location, in the same location. And for this one, I'm gonna color it red. Okay. So what we want to capture over here is that there's going to be a moment in which this build is going to be white, and then a moment that it's going to be black. Oh, sorry, red, and then a moment that they're going to be gone. So I'm going to select, let's say that I'm going to do my demolition on the bulk excavation stage. So I'm going to select this one of the shapes. I'm going to edit that. And this is the white one. So the white one is going to be there from the beginning up to the bulk excavation stage. So that white shape is going to be removed on milestone number 2. So and the red shape is going to be present only at the milestone that I want to highlight the demolition stage is happening. So I'm going to put that to be on showing and being removed on milestone number 3. So now if I go back, I have a state where this building is there, and I have a state where is that building is being demolished, and a state that there is no building. And in the ground over here, you could create a zone that would represent where the building was. So this is a great way for you to kind of like highlight the demolition state, but also to copy paste massings if you want to use it for like other reasons. Okay. Cool. The next tips and tricks that I want to show is how to add shoring to your site. In cmBuilder, we have a lot of different shoring types, and some of them are placed on the ground, and some of them are placed on the grade part. So like some of them you will select a line and put them over here in the bottom of your excavation, and some of them you're going to select a line on the top of your excavation. What is the difference? The difference is that if you have a scenario where your area is very, very sloped, the resources that are placed on the bottom of your excavation are not going to follow that slope, but they are easier to be placed, right? Because you simply draw one shape and that's it. For areas that you have like a big slope in your existing grade, you should place the resources following that grade. So right now it's not very easy to identify which one is what, but we are changing this. We're gonna redo the labeling on our shoring category. But basically, if I select, for example, let me delete this part over here. If I select the concrete lagging soldier pile, I'm gonna put in just one line and see how that's gonna behave anywhere. So you see that the resource is being placed on the ground. So it means that that line that controls the sketch should be connected to the top part of your excavation. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to select that line and I'm going to snap it to this face, and I'm not going to make it flush with the face like this. I'm going to move away from the face, maybe like 2.7 feet or something like that. So now when I hit confirm, that resource is kind of flushed with the face of my excavation. And basically, I just need to double click on that and make it go lower. I could draw a line that would kind of like do the whole perimeter of this site. But this is just to show that if there is like a big sloped site, let me find one over here. So if I have a big sloped site, I have to place that line following the top part of my excavation. If I'm working with one that is anchored at the bottom or is placed at the bottom of your excavation, you should put that line on the bottom of your excavation. Okay, so I'm going to create a cut over here on this part that I know that's going to be quite sloped, as you can see. And then I'm going to do the same shoring that I did right now. If I do that shoring with the concrete lagging soda pile, I'm going to create my line and I'm going to snap this line to this face, and I'm going to hold shift and bring this line away from that face by around like 2 point something feet. When I hit confirm, now you see that that object is actually following the top part of my excavation. So I'm going to double click on that, click on the adjust, and then just bring this whole thing down so you would kind of like see that shape going on over there. For the ones that are anchored at the bottom, they are more suited for excavations that are working with a grade that's not very sloped. So I believe that the horizontal one is, let me get the shotcrete one. So the shotcrete wall, so if I do a polyline and do the same thing, you notice that now that object is growing from the bottom up, and then I'm adjusting the height, right? So it's easier to manage because you don't have to like snap too much with the faces and whatnot. But just keep in mind that once you go down with your excavation, that object will also be moving down, okay? Unless you make it snatch to your plane. So this is a logic that we want to review, and we're going to do that soon. But I just want to show you guys what is the existing conditions right now, okay? So explore that. the shoring part is one of our most complex resources that you can use, but it's already like it gives you like a lot of understanding about like how you're gonna do the shoring in your site and so on and so forth.
Can you also just quickly show how you can quantify that? Like if you the nice thing about it is like if you double click that, like the one over there to the left, yeah, it gives you some panel quantity and you can export this to Excel. Maybe
Yeah.
if for those who don't know the export QTO, so that will give you the length, I believe, right, for shoring. Pedro, let's check it.
Yep.
So it'll give you some lengths. So if you want to, get a good level of understanding, there you go. So you've got the total contact footage, it looks like, or length and deep of that resource. So it's another way to kind of double check your estimate.
Cool. Yeah, so going to the next one, let's use the 3D labels for persistent measurements. And I'm sorry, AI generated Barbie, we are going to be done with this quickly. So let's go to the first one, which is using the 3D labels for persistent measurements. So basically, I like to do that whenever I want to highlight that a specific kind of like measurement should be there at all times. So let's say, for example, that the difference of elevation between the top of this part over here is going to be to the top and the bottom is going to be 36.81 feet. And this is a good moment also to explain the different review measurements that we have. So basically, the first one is the minimum distance, where you select the 2 points and it will give you the minimum distance in between those 2 points orthogonally to one of the known planes. The measured distance will give you the components of that difference between those 2 points. And the Z will give you that total elevation. But keep in mind that the delta X and the delta Y are following true north. So something that we will adjust in our new updates. And the third one is the sea level elevation. So basically just measuring the elevation according to sea level from those points, right? So let's say that I know that this total height is 36.81 feet. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna create a label and I'm gonna put this label on the wall. And then I'm gonna rotate this so you will be facing that. And then I can just like type in over here a couple of things just to get that sense of how big, how tall this area is, right? So it can have this kind of thing. I can add more dashes over here, more hyphens to keep that. And the reason why I want to show this is because I use this for a customer. And like the other day, it was very important for them because they wanted to really, really highlight this dimension. Even though it's not going to be like super accurate in terms of where like the little dashes are, but this is still like very, very interesting to make sure that people know that this is like an important kind of like thing. Maybe we can even turn this into a feature in the future.
Well, it's critical. Yeah, I know it's critical from a safety perspective, which a lot of our users are using cmBuilder to model and simulate safety factors. And then if you want to just quickly do a cut, understand the depth, and if you have to have, protection, edge protection, or you don't need edge protection, or different types of like safety considerations, it's a nice way to visually call that out on the plan.
Yeah. The difference between this and keeping this minimum distance is that the minimum distance is a temporary measurement. So once you close your scenario and open it again, they're going to be gone unless you put them in a slide, in your presentation slide. Then they will be persistent. Okay. So I can have that. And now that every time that I activate this slide, that dimension will show up.
Just looking at the time check here, Pedro, we're about a minute over.
Yes.
We can stay online for a couple of minutes if you want to ask some questions. But was there one more thing you wanted to show?
Yes, I wanted to show, what is it? Yeah, so let me just do the radius for a crane. Like sometimes some people sometimes want to use that and keep like a kind of like a definition of the radius from the crane like constant. So you could simply like put in a crane on your site. So let me put the cargo crane over here. So if I put a crane on my site and I want to show what is the actual radius that this configuration is going to give me, I can do a combination of my 3D line, create a circle from the starting point, bring that circle over here. I will project that circle on the ground on my terrain, and this is now going to become part of my terrain. And I'm going to put in a 3D label that's going to define what is going to be the radius of that crane in here. So you can just put in radius equals to, I don't know, 180 feet. Cool. So this is a great thing to the combination of these tools to showcase this part. Yeah, so I think that's it for today. I was gonna show this part as well, but like I don't think that I have time.
Yeah, no, all good. And there is there's a cone that you can automatically create in the, maybe just show the create. But this is a nice tool that if you want to have it showing up all the time. We've seen a couple customers do this. It's pretty cool. Yeah, if you want to actually turn the out resource coverage envelope on, you kind of have this view, but that only, you might not want to have it on all the time. It kind of gets in the way of stuff. So this 3D line is another way to do it, which is great. Any questions from the group here before we jump off? If anyone has any questions they're working on right now or something they need help with right now, feel free to pop it in the question or in the chat. Just a reminder how to get a hold of us. Pedro, maybe you can show if you ever need anything, go up to that help section, drop it in the chat, or you can book a session.
Yeah, you can jump in the chat over here.
Yep.
Or you can just directly book a session.
Book a session. In the user guide, we have a brand new revamped cmBuilder support center. So many folks may have already seen it, but it's got lots of good stuff. We're adding more articles and frequently asked questions. So you can just search that knowledge base. That's what I like to do. So you just search, like, I don't know, crane.
It's always important to be signed in when you do this, because it will give you access to more information as well.
Yes. So question from Blair, are there a series of these videos that would provide people with new to the process? Yes. So we have a whole whack of tutorial videos in the cmBuilder Support Center. We're up to 10 now, I think. We're doing 11. We're trying to do one a week. And we're kind of updating them as we go. So it's trying to cover most of the process of just kind of getting started. So love your feedback. If you think there's other things we can add to it, that'd be great. And then, yeah, just going into the user guide and searching stuff that you have questions on is another way to learn as well. Some tutorial type information in there as well. Any other? Oh, got another one. Can you break a massing into columns for demolition staging? Massing into columns. Maybe not exactly, but I think there's another way to do it, Pedro, if you want to show.
Yeah, so to do it in columns, the best way is to use the detail massing, right? Because then you can, if depending on how high your building is, it's better for you to create like several detail masses, because then you can just go in and define what is going to be, sorry, let me redraw this. So you can define the different heights for it, right? Because you will create like a repeating kind of like setup of masses, and then you can use that. You can name this in the colors that, in the name of the column that you want. But basically, for columns that you want to show like a bunch of them, that would be my suggestion. The only thing is that the detail massing is it's one of our first tools. So like they're still using a little bit like our old logic stuff, but this is being revamped as we speak. So I'm expecting to have a new version of this in a month or two.
I've also seen, maybe you can show, I've seen some pretty creative stuff where if you do a massing, we actually have some column resources, right? So you can use some concrete columns or steel columns and beams, I believe we have. So structural elements that you can actually just pop them in, use a massing as a reference. You can actually just model out representations of what that would look like. So it's like a basic direct modeling engine. So you can just do these things and you can sequence those things for demolition. It exists, you say end at this milestone, right? So you say starts with this, ends at that milestone. Here's all the temporary resources we need to execute that work. So I encourage you, John, to go search the catalog for like building elements, so like steel columns, concrete columns. I think there's circular ones. There's a bunch of stuff. And if there's anything in there that you need and we don't have, just request it in the catalog. We'll add it. Oh, can you slope walls from Jared?
Which walls are you talking about?
Without having to use the rotation feature.
So if you're talking about like walls, like something like this, without using the rotation feature, we will need to create a line that is anchored on a slope, like I did for this guy over here, or you can create a point-based resource, let's say concrete wall, and I put in a point-based resource, and you do a snap of one of the faces with the ground. So now that's following that ground, but it's only following that ground on that location, right? I'm not sure if the slope will remain constant in all the steps of the way over here. So that's why using linear based resources is your best option, because it will always follow the ground. You muted.
Is that what you meant, or slope? I'm guessing you meant slope walls from a massing, not from the excavation.
Oh yeah, so with slope walls for massing, you can only do that with your by rotating it.
Yeah.
So
I think that this is something we're revamping the massing feature. Like, it's a huge overhaul. So we can check if that's actually. Let me ping the team right now. See if we're gonna have that.
you can also use the snapping for the massing as well. So if I want to snap align this face with this part, I can have it matching now. Did I answer your question, Jared? Hopefully, yes.
Okay, yes.
Oh,
Okay, perfect.
cool.
Yeah, Jared, I can send you an email too with just kind of things we're planning for the new massing. I'm pretty sure sloping is covered, but I'm just getting confirmation. Okay, any other questions from the team here? Anything else we can help with? Fantastic. Pedro, you stayed in character the whole time. Unbelievable. A little outro music.
I'm getting used to this. I'm gonna use it more often.
The production quality of our monthly workshops has gone up substantially. Thank you for everyone for joining. Thank you for Pedro being a good sport. And we will do this again next month. So I popped a little event into the chat there. We're going to have our next kind of roundtable event where we get interesting people from our community together and talk shop about things that are happening. This is going to be all about the modern and the future superintendent, the digitally enabled superintendent. And we've got amazing panelists that are going to talk about lessons learned, things they're seeing on site, just like an interesting thing. So I encourage you to sign up for that. And we'll send out information for our August workshop shortly. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
See you, everyone. Bye.